All right, the super crew is here. Welcome to the first of our fall 2015 BlackProGen Hangouts. This is a major accomplishment. We should give ourselves a round of applause. It's been a while since we've done one of these, and believe it or not, we've actually got 6 different states represented here with the people here on the panel. And I'll go ahead and introduce myself. Hold on just a second. I got to make sure we mute everybody. I'm sure in about probably another 2 or 3 years, it's going to be me. Hold on just a second.
It's all about family.
I know. Yeah, we do. I'm getting ready to mute you. Can you mute yourself? Hold on just a second. I gotta make sure to mute everybody. I'm sure in about okay. 2 or 3 years. So I'm gonna go ahead and mute everyone else. If you can't mute yourself, I'm gonna mute you until we get done with everything. But hello, I'm Nika Smith of whoisnikasmith.com, and I will be tonight's, I guess, moderator for our session tonight on the Freedmen's Bureau. And we've got people from various states represented. I'm here in Tennessee. We've got folks in Kentucky, Virginia, Maryland, and also in New Mexico tonight. And so let's just go around really quickly and do some introductions. I'm going to go ahead and take everybody off mute. We'll start with Miss Shelley.
Good evening. I'm in Virginia. Welcome, everybody. Glad to be here.
Let's see. And it sounds like somebody's got some little bit of feedback, but that's okay. Miss Angela, can you go next? Introduction. I'm here in Tennessee. We've got folks in Kentucky, Virginia, Maryland, and also in New Mexico tonight. And so let's just go around. Somebody's got some feedback. I'm going to go ahead. I don't know who is watching live, but we've got feedback coming from your computer.
Welcome, everybody. Glad to be here.
Okay. I think it's Miss Angela. I just muted her. If you've got the, if you're here on the panel and you've got your sound live or you're watching live on YouTube, you may want to go ahead and mute the video because it's coming through your audio. So, okay, Miss Angela says she's done that. No, you haven't. We can still hear your audio. So close out, my suggestion is to close out all your other browser windows, even if you're not sure, because if for some reason the audio is seeping through. But let's go ahead and move forward. George, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm George Jeter. I'm in Santa Fe, New Mexico, representing the Southwest here.
Absolutely awesome. And let's go ahead with True.
She's muted.
Hold on just a second. Let me unmute you.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to see all you all. And I'm here in Kentucky. I'm just a genealogy blogger at My True Roots. So I'm just glad to be amongst my people.
And we're gonna give Miss Angela a third chance. Let's see.
Oh, okay.
Yes, she got it together.
Hello, everyone. I'm Angela Walton Raji, coming out from Maryland, sitting on the edge of the Chesapeake Bay.
Absolutely good. I'm glad we finally got it together. Okay, so tonight, if you have any questions that you want the panel to consider or discuss during the session on the Freedmen's Bureau, please feel free to tweet us using the hashtag BlackProGen, HO meaning hangout. I just thought about how hilarious that hashtag is. We probably won't be using that one again. Or you can just do BlackProGen. Either way, we're paying attention to both hashtags. That's just really funny to me. But before we get started, I'm just going to give a little bit of an overview on the Freedmen's Bureau. Now, some people they may already know about this, but I think it bears repeating some information. I'm just going to go over some stuff briefly to talk about the organization and what it actually is before we get into the discussion tonight. So the official name is the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. And one of the things that we need to make sure we point out is that refugees did not necessarily have to be former slaves or of African descent. So there are people who did not fit those designations who were actually a part of these records. Oh, I see we have another person that joined us. That would be Miss Linda. After I give the introduction to the Bureau, we'll go ahead and have you introduce yourself. So let me go ahead and get everybody muted here while I go over this stuff really quickly. So going back to what I was discussing, as a refugee didn't necessarily have to be somebody who was of African descent or a former slave. So there are people who did not fit those characteristics who are part of the records. The Freedmen's Bureau was established by the War Department through the Freedmen's Bureau Bill on March 3rd, 1865, and federal operations took place between March of 1865 until June of 1872. Now, there were other organizations that operated in a similar fashion that predated the federal mandate for this. And the other piece about this is that the initial bill needed to be extended a couple of times, and those were through acts that took place in July of 1866 and July of 1868. Most of the operations for the Freedmen's Bureau ceased in early 1869, except for those of the superintendents of education and claims agents. The organization of the Bureau, just quickly to go over this, the commissioner was appointed by the president and make full reports to the president and Congress on their state with exhibits. And there's a number of microfilms that correspond with the commissioner. There were also clerks who were assigned to the commissioner by the Secretary of War, not exceeding one chief clerk, two of the fourth class, two of the third class, and five of the first class. There were also assistant commissioners, one for each state who was part of the rebellion, not to exceed 10 of those. And they were assigned to make quarterly reports to the commissioner. And they were part of divisions the divisions for those were government-controlled lands, records, which included education, financial affairs, and medical affairs. And that particular office, the assistant commissioners, have a series of microfilm dedicated to them. Then what we're probably going to end up spending a lot of our time on tonight discussing are the field offices. And these included sub-assistant commissioners, superintendents, agents, claims officers, clerks, provost marshals, dispersing officers, and medical officers. And these field office records are amazing. I just love these. They included field office reports, letters received and sent, contracts, which would be labor contracts. If you're doing any post-Civil War records research, that's where you're going to spend a lot of time. Certificates, registers, censuses, affidavits, and other documents. And then there was also the Freedmen's branch, which assumed to continue the unfinished business of the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, which was ended by an act of Congress approved on June 10, 1872, and was effective on June 30th, 1872. I know I talked super fast, but I was trying to give us enough time so that we could really delve into the number of questions and things that are going on or that we're going to discuss tonight. So before we get started, I'm going to unmute Linda so she can introduce herself. Have at it, Miss Linda.
I had to work. Hold on. Hello.
Hi. So if you can just introduce yourself and tell us where you're from.
I am Linda Sims, and I am from St. Louis, and I'm part of the St. Louis African American and Historical Genealogy Society.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to unmute everybody so we can jump into the discussion for this evening. All right, so question number 1. Do you use the Freedmen's Bureau often?
I do. I use them frequently. I research multiple states, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Mississippi, and Tennessee primarily, and frequently I am using those records. particularly because I have learned that what I do is beyond my one family in any of those given cities or counties. And particularly because they did not live in a vacuum. They dealt with neighbors, they dealt with individuals, they had to go and negotiate things, they had to go and record things or have things registered. Sometimes they needed assistance. And as a result, I researched the communities where the field offices were, where my families lived. And frequently, I can be immersed in one project, and suddenly something comes across my mind. Oh, wow, I forgot. Let me go and look and see if there's a new kind of document that's available, and I'll just go right to it because I'm also a writer. So it's just good information.
Well, do you want me to go next? Can you guys hear me?
I can hear her. Go ahead.
Okay. I don't use them as much as I need to use them. And I'm making myself use them more and more now that we have the mapping website up. I think that makes it easier for me to be able to go into the different states because I don't just look at Virginia, because I'm also trying to find out what's also further north. So that mapping cycle, the mapping website has really encouraged me. You know, it's almost check it every week type thing. And so I'm digging and digging and digging. So I think there's more opportunity and I can just use it more. But other than that, I wasn't using it and know the information is there, but didn't know if I had people in those records.
Thank you for mentioning the mapping side. I appreciate that.
Since you didn't.
I was about to say, I'm like,
I
what?
know. We got you, sister.
Oh, there's my addition to the that's my baby.
Well, if you can, Angela, talk a little bit about that before we move to the next one.
Sure.
Talk about that mapping because you know if she could take a couple minutes on that.
Sure, I'll be happy to. The site we're talking about is mappingthefreedmensbureau.com. And thanks to the particular skill set of Tony Carrier, who many of you know as the creator of Low Country Africana, she found really the particular plug-in that would work, that would allow us to construct a map reflecting every single Freedmen's Bureau field office. And in addition to that, once we had constructed the map, and she and I were both working weeks and weeks and weeks, we were going through every National Archives descriptive pamphlet, looking for every field office, and we marked them. But we also noticed that there were other places of interest that we needed to share, including hospitals, including schools, Freedmen schools, including contraband camps. Some of these places are mentioned in the Bureau, but there were also places of interest that were not a part of the Bureau, but that served the exact same people. The Freedmen's Bank, that is a different institution entirely. And as a result, we decided, you know, we need to put the banks on the map. In addition to that, again, looking at the same population, it was decided, well, you know, many of these individuals descend from soldiers, individuals who served in the Union Army, served in the United States Army, and we decided to mark the places on the map where they fought in battles, because we're all talking about a span of years from, what, 1864 to basically 1874. So we decided to mark those on the map. So anyway, I'm glad to hear it's helpful. Thank you for mentioning it.
I would also add, at least for me, when it comes to the Mapping the Freedmen's Bureau website, if I discover that a family that I am researching, whether it's mine, someone else's, or just because I'm curious about something, And I can't find them on the 1870 census, or there's some gap between 1865 and 1880, and I know the geography of the area, but I'm not entirely sure like where the nearest field office would be. That's like the first thing that I go to. It's just it's automatic. It's like popping up Google Maps
Right.
for
Well,
me.
I will add that the plugin that Tony identified utilizes Google Maps.
Right.
And so as we plugged in a city or county where the office was located, a field office was located, Google grabs it and zooms in exactly with the accurate geographic coordinates, and they are planted on the map. So if you're thinking, oh, gee, my family lived in Sevier County, Arkansas, and southwest Arkansas, well, zoom in on that map and see if what was the closest field office to the town where your ancestors lived. And I'm in the process of adding another map. It's not complete yet. Maybe in another week or 10 days, there's going to be a new map pointing out the residences of formerly enslaved people from Indian Territory who are always overlooked. And people would think that there were no enslaved people in Indian Territory, what eventually became Oklahoma. And I am putting that now on a map, and I'm using an official document to base that on. I'm using the slave schedules where they were enslaved. And so that is going to be a new dimension to the map very soon.
That's good. Something that I would also, just this is the quick sidebar, is I think there are a lot of us that are not using Google Maps and using the full capabilities of Google Maps, and not just Google Maps, but Google Earth as well. One of the things that I know that I use it for, and that I am using it for, is some kind of a similar project where I mapped out all the plantations that are in the parish my family is from. So that I can at a glance like see where is everything, and if somebody is smart enough to tell me how I can like bring in mapping the Freedmen's Bureau, or I can load that into my own personal map. I mean, think about the possibilities of being able to map out all your family locations, add in the Freedmen's Bureau field offices, find the one that's closest, or any points of interest. I think
you can pin that to your family map and just indicate field office on your family map. Maybe use a different icon, maybe a different building icon to mark that. And but in fact, I hope that others will begin to realize that as you create a new map, you are creating new knowledge. People never realized how many field offices there were until they saw them visualized on a map. How many Freedmen hospitals? Because we have multiple maps on that one site. We have a map for the hospitals, a map for the battle sites, a map for the contraband camps, a map for the Freedmen schools, a map for the banks, as well as a map for the field as well. But you can create a map pertaining to your family circle, and I hope people will do that.
It's valuable.
Awesome. Now, George, do you use the Freedmen's Bureau records quite a bit in your research?
Actually, this year I haven't done much at all, but I'm interested in learning about South Carolina, particularly Barnwell County, where my mother's people are. I'm real interested in that to see if they're part of the records. So I'm here to learn.
Absolutely. Good. Good. Now, True, what about you?
So I was on mute there for a minute. I knew about the records for years, and this is the first time I actually tried to do some indexing, and it was very intimidating, but I'm getting through it, and it does take a lot of time, and that's kind of like my pay it forward moment is trying to get these records indexed. And yeah, I've been learning and listening in on all the about the Freedmens and the mapping. I remember when Angela and them had their debut. live when they went live with that, so that was real meaningful also. But I haven't found any family members just quite yet, and I was still trying to get used to the idea about it, the regional
I have.
aspects of it as well. So.
I do have a suggestion. Are you all familiar with the National Archives descriptive pamphlets? That,
Yes.
I was just about to bring that up.
that is your guide
Okay.
of the descriptive. In fact, that is what we use to construct the map, the descriptive pamphlet, and you can go to nara.gov or archive.gov and download the pamphlet pertaining to your state or states of interest. And then you want to go through, wow, somebody's phone. You can go through, zero in on the various field offices, and then go to the mapping site and zoom in and see which site may have been closest to the facility where your ancestors, or to the community rather, where your ancestors lived. But the descriptive pamphlet is very helpful.
I just went and got mine. I actually have M1905. I remember it by heart.
Right, right. Download and print it.
I printed it out. It's this thick. It's huge. But this is the Freedmen Bureau records for the state of Louisiana. And something that's interesting, I mean, once you actually start getting into the history of where your ancestors live, is that it could have been under a number of jurisdictions. So where my family is from was part of Mississippi during the pre-Bureau set of records. And then once the actual, Lord, my poor child.
I hear you.
Once the Bureau was started, then it got rolled into Louisiana. So what I did was, once I printed out this actual guide, I wrote down which corresponding roll of microfilm went to a particular time period. So then that way, the next time I was going into the records, I wouldn't be on a wild goose chase trying to figure out what was going on. Something else that I also did, and this is just because I'm a little like crazy, anytime I searched the roll of microfilm, I highlighted it and I put the date that I searched it. So then that way I'm not going back through 5 years later, because some of these dates are from 2007. Going through, looking, I mean, because one of the things I think people fail to realize, and I think True touched on this, is just how extensive these records are and how many of them are there, and the fact that it's, you know, the indexers are making it possible for people to search them by name, but that, you know, the whole totality is not indexed. So you're literally reading handwriting, going page by page by page by page, and sometimes you want to just tap out. That's why I had to, this was in stages that I had to do it, you know, for me, but I'm just sharing what's worked for me in terms of, you know, before this time, being able to go through the records.
This Linda, I'd like to say I also use the Freedmen Bureau records, the labor contracts in particular, mostly on my paternal line. They mostly concentrated in Chickasaw County, Mississippi. They didn't move right away, so I've been able to find majority of the slave owners, former slave owners, in the contract. So one ancestor in particular I haven't found, but I know they were there. So what I did was downloaded all of the Chickasaw County labor contracts, looking for my other grandfather maybe lended himself out to another planter. So I'm using them that way, as well as indexing them for the Freedmen Bureau project.
That's great.
Pay it forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so since we brought up the indexing, is anybody else indexing besides True?
And Linda.
And Linda.
Renata.
And Linda.
I think Renata is too.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she. In fact, I think isn't Renata
She's an arbitrator.
Arbitrator. She's an arbitrator.
Okay.
That's right. That's right. I'm also an indexer, and one of the things that I find that, well, the indexing is going to make the process a little bit simpler, but one of the things that I do encourage people to do, besides giving that contribution to the community. I also encourage you to remember to look at the record in its original, in the original context in which it was created. In other words, there are many reels of microfilm per field office, and you will find that when you're on some of the sites where they are digitized, you're looking at a document out of context. I recommend that in addition to the wonderful work that's coming out with Family Search, that you also use the Internet Archive, that you can go to archive.org and read the Freedmen's Bureau records there from time to time, because you're looking at the entire reel of microfilm from beginning to end, and you're going page by page by page, and it's not taken out of context. And I think that's very important, because it's important to understand the descriptive pamphlets correspond to the reel, whereas sometimes when it's digitized, you type in a name, you may get the page that has the name of an ancestor, but you don't know really where in that reel, which is the microfilmed reel, is a National Archives publication in and of itself. M1901 is a publication, not just the descriptive pamphlet, but it is describing the microfilm publication, and it's important to remember that too.
Awesome.
All right. So
Can anyone hear me?
yeah, we can hear you, Renata.
Oh, okay. Hi, I was on a little potty break when y'all were saying my name, but I heard. Yes, I can't let you guys see me tonight, but yes, I'm indexing and arbitrating, and have been doing so before the project. But I wanted to say that I have recently just kind of given in to the fact that sometimes the images are just not scanned well. And so I used to, I guess, try to be a hero and, you know, figure out a really badly scanned image. But I'm a lot less stressed about it now, because you can return the batch return the batch, and there's an opportunity for you to say that it needs to be rescanned. I have recently just kind of
Okay, it popped her back in when Bernice came in.
That's it's because she's watching live, so I muted her audio. Go ahead, Renata.
Well, that was it. I just kind of wanted to give that suggestion, because I don't know if anyone, you know, if others are doing that, and you can bring it to the attention of Family Search that the image is just too blurry, or, you know, whatever the problem, it's too dark. I just returned one tonight that no matter how I adjusted the settings, the brightness, the contrast, I just could not read what it said. So rather than driving yourself crazy, go ahead and return the batch and make sure you give the reason, so that Family Search will look at it again, and they might be able to provide a better image of that record.
I have a question about that, Renata. Have you had a chance to compare, let's say, what you might be looking at on Family Search, and to go to check, let's say, on the Internet Archive to see if it was scanned a little bit better? Now, I know they do not interface, but my reason for asking that question is to see whether or not it was something that was scanned, initially poorly scanned. Maybe the original scan of the initial microfilm may not have been clear, or is it something that Family Search can rescan? Because we do have two sources for Freedmen's Bureau records. Have you had a chance to compare that at all?
I honestly had not even thought about doing that, so no, that's not something I've done.
All right.
Mm-hmm. That's a good idea if you have that, you know, that extra time, energy,
Yeah.
desire to
Yeah.
go through, and find that. But no, I never thought about doing that. One of the things I used to do in my early days of indexing, and I actually don't do this anymore either, is if I was having a very difficult time deciphering a handwriting on like maybe the first name, but I had the last name, or I'm trying to get that last name right, I would go on Ancestry and look the people up and find the exact people, and find them in another year and stuff. But I don't even do that anymore. I think because once I became an arbitrator, I realized that that was just kind of wasted energy because it's going to be arbitrated. And so, if you get something wrong, it's going to get caught unless another person gets it exactly wrong the same way you got it wrong. So that's how arbitration works. Anytime that there's that two indexers submit anything that's different, then it goes to arbitration, and the arbitrator has to look at it and decide what it is. So
That's good to know.
That was
Anyone
so
else
much
have
stuff.
any other perspectives on indexing, experiences with indexing, why people should choose to
Well,
index the project?
that's one point that I think I would like to emphasize, and I don't think it's been emphasized enough. And I'm really thrilled, number one, with the spirit in which the people at Family Search have launched the project. But I do want to point out that this is an American record set. It's not strictly a black record set. There were white families, poor whites, who were decimated, who really lost a lot of property, who lost a lot of everything after the war as well. War is not something that we understand because we haven't seen it for 150 years on American soil. But a lot of white families are in those records receiving rations. And individuals may want to know what happened to their great-great-grandparents who were poor farmers in the South. The people who staffed the Bureau were whites. They were white officers, white soldiers who staffed the field offices themselves. There are individuals who worked in the Freedmen schools. Some of the early teachers, if you just do a Google search, Freedmen schools after the Civil War, you see countless images from Harper's Weekly to Frank Leslie's Illustrated magazine, other 19th century publications showing white teachers. You have a lot of people who were of different ethnicities who worked at the Bureau and who were served by the Bureau. It is the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Land. Refugees, many of whom were white, the freedmen, of course, many of whom were once enslaved, and the abandoned lands that had to be dealt with, owned by Southern whites. Oaths of allegiance, people who had seceded, who had to have their oaths of allegiance to the United States restated before they could get those lands back. This is an American record set, and it's not said enough. I research Western Arkansas. And I know Fort Smith, Arkansas field office, there were more whites and Indians receiving rations than formerly enslaved black people. So it's something that's very important that we understand this is not just going to shine a new light for those families once enslaved. It can open doors for everyone.
Excellent.
Okay, Miss Bernice, you had a question you wanted to ask George.
No, I didn't have a question to ask George. I had a comment for George because George mentioned Barnwell District, South Carolina, and I have the book. You can see my book on South Carolina. I'm actually going there next week. But George, you can find a wealth of information in South Carolina. There are, hi there, True, register of complaints, volumes and volumes of registers of complaints in Barnwell, and indentures of apprenticeships, as well as labor contracts. So I hope that, George, you will get into those records because you will find so much in South Carolina. And I'm going there next week to just look at some court records, but certainly this is one of the states that I have been doing my research in.
Oh, okay. Are you going to Williston?
No, I'm not going to Williston. I'm going to Edgeville. I'm going to Abbeville and Greenwood and
Oh, okay.
Aiken.
Okay.
All right, so moving on, what stage in the genealogy process do you all find using these records is essential? Do you think that people should begin to use these at the onset? Do you think they need to be a little bit more seasoned?
Well, it depends. If they come through track one, they need to know how to analyze a record, and it don't matter at what stage they're at, because once you get something, you got to know what you have. And I think if people get educated on what they're looking at or how to look at something, it doesn't matter if you're a beginner or not. You got to be able to extract that information and say, what does that mean, or what does that do for me? So I would say you access them when you get access to them, and it shouldn't matter if you're new. You just got to know what to do with them when you get them. So you can't just collect them and have them sitting there, because we've all done that already. You know, you got to pull that stuff out and break it apart and see what's on there, because it's going to give you leads to 10 other things, if not more than that, or more questions.
I agree. I
agree. I definitely agree. I found my ancestor in Louisiana on a labor contract in 1868. However, I was trying to go forward after 1868, and I could not find him in 1870. But I did find him in 1880. But the labor contract really confirmed his last name, as well as the names of his siblings and his mother.
Oh, that's wonderful.
What I like about the records is they give you more of a story of what was going on in the lives of the people, just like Angela said, black and white at the time. For me, I've never found any of my family in the records except for the discovery I made years and years ago, the day, Angela, that I met you at the archives, and that was finding my great-grandfather.
Okay, I remember, yeah.
Yeah, he was actually one of the teachers in one of the Freedmen schools. So he was in that superintendent's record from 1869-70, but he's the only relative I've ever, only ancestor I've ever found. But it just, when I'm indexing or when I'm just researching and using the records, I'm just imagining for the descendants of those who I'm reading about, it really gives them the stories, or really a look at, what their ancestor was actually doing or involved in, or perhaps his personality or something like that. So I'm still hoping to find, something else one day, but I think that's a really important, benefit of using these records.
I will add, oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to share that I had a surprise once when I found my great-grandfather, Samuel Walton, the first of the four Sams in my family, and I never found him receiving rations, never found him as a teacher, never found him making any kind of petition or complaint. But what I did find was that his name was on a receipt. And this was one of those mundane sections that are not name rich. They just are conducting business in the field office, and they had to pay gave my great-grandfather a receipt because he provided $10 worth of lumber to build the Freedmen School. And to realize, wow, here was my great-grandfather. I know he was a literate man, and to see his emphasis and interest on influencing the community and seeing that the children had a place where they could study and learn told me just a little bit more about him, the man. And that was significant. But what I've also found is the plethora of record types that are there. We haven't really talked much about that. Besides the labor contracts, we know that there are marriage records. Sometimes it's a roster, sometimes it's a certificate, sometimes they're cohabitation records. But there are transportation records. There are records that, and I have, for example, what's her name? Selma Stewart in Newport News, Virginia, shared a record with me of individuals who left Northern Virginia to go to Arkansas for 2 years to work, and the record transporting them from Northern Virginia to the Mississippi Delta, part of eastern Arkansas. There are child recovery records. There are the outrages and the complaints, very painful to read and very humbling, because we realize how much our ancestors suffered even after official enslavement had ended, when they had to go through so much to get their children who were being detained by former slaveholders, calling them apprentices, when they really just were still keeping a free labor force. There's so many different kinds of records and receipts. Daily reports sometimes can be not name rich, other times full of surprises. And the letters, that is where you're going to find the stories. You're going to find certain things where people appeal to the Bureau, and 3 or 4 days later you see the resolution to that case and realize what they went through. The beginning of freedom may have been a time of joy, but it was still a time of sorrow and pain. It's very humbling to look at these records.
I was going to add that I am in Renata's situation. I've only found one record, despite my big, gigantic guide and nice, pretty dates and highlights. I found one letter with my ancestors in there, and that was my great-great-grandfather's brother. Someone stole his horse, and he went to the Bureau to basically advocate for the person who stole his horse to bring his horse back. And I went and looked for the resolution, and there was no resolution. So he lost his horse. That's the only thing I found on a direct line. But
Nika, on your Oklahoma or Indian Territory ancestors, check out the Freedmen's Bureau in Fort Smith. More Cherokees and Cherokee citizens than formerly enslaved people from Arkansas are on those records. So check.
I believe that might actually be my my break on my Rogers line of my family. So thank you for the suggestion.
I've often wondered if maybe, just maybe, my great-grandfather was emancipated prior to the actual act of emancipation. You know, it's not the right time to go into his whole story, but have a presentation on his story. And you know, his slave owners, his owners kept dying, and so he kept changing over, you know, who owned him. And the last owner died in 1869. I'm sorry, 59, and he became presumably, well, he did because I have the records, the property of that gentleman's wife. But he had only been with James H. Yarborough for 2 years before he died. So you know, and he's the same one that was a teacher, and I don't see him yet, you know, getting any rations or anything like that. So I'm just wondering, maybe he was actually emancipated, you know, early in some way, and maybe that's why I don't see him in any of the records for Franklin County. It's just a hunch that I have, but I don't know if I'll ever see anything to let me know it for sure. But then again, he does have a cohabitation record, so that can't be true now that I'm thinking out loud.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I was going to say, I have found with one of our former slave owners on my paternal line where one of the slave owners apprenticed 2 of the children on my Hobson line, but it didn't mention that the parents had died, which I found very interesting. One of the things I was doing this summer was going through court records. Of course, that's very tedious and didn't have enough time to get through them all. But that's my next journey, is to go back and look at those court records. But I did see that and found it very interesting that it didn't mention the parents were deceased.
Was it before or after emancipation, Linda?
After emancipation. This was 1865.
I would look at other records from that community.
Yeah.
And other apprentice, that was the term. That was the term that was used to justify keeping children in bondage.
Yeah,
And
apprentices.
I take a careful look at that.
Okay.
Well, I was able to actually track a USCT soldier, starting with his Freedmen labor contract, and then going back and looking at him in the United States Colored Troop, finding his papers in the United States Colored Troop, and then moving it forward to the 1876 election. It really sets you up to tell a full story, because I also found a document where the person of which this soldier was living after the Civil War, he was actually in a document that he was a slave for life, for the same person that he was living with after the Civil War and signed the labor contract. He went right back to the same owner's home. And so I wrote this up in a blog, and I'll post the blog so that you all could see how I pretty much told the story of this individual. But it was really interesting, though, to see him on that labor contract and to see the record prior to the Civil War and then after the Civil War.
Wow, that's interesting.
That is interesting. And the thing of it is, where I'm looking, and it's West Virginia, and it crosses into Virginia, into West Virginia after the 1865 record. But I'm thinking I have to search several field offices and not just look at the closest one, because I can't assume if they did, they just went to the one that was closest. You know, I don't know why. I'm just thinking I got to search whatever's in the area, and if there's any up in that area, because I haven't seen any, but I need to cover a trail not knowing which way they might have headed out. I know one group went northwise towards Ohio. I don't know in between there. Did they stop? Did they register? Did they do whatever? And so I think it's also good to do the same thing. You know how we say, search the whole community? You need to search a line, of those Freedmen offices, if there's some sort of a line where you could see somebody migrating to another state or a different area, to look at all of them on that way going, so we won't miss anything, because it might not be the usual. I had the guy register. I had to learn that people living in Ohio for USCT, they were in the 54th Massachusetts. They weren't in none of the Ohio ones. All these folks, several of them in certain areas, all were in the 54th, or in different state groups. So that squashed the thing of looking, because I was never finding them because they weren't there. They were in another state. So again, you have to search the pattern or go around that globe type thing to see where the records could be, because it's never where we think they're going to be.
Right. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Anyone else discover any surprises? Anything that was startling, or you have some stories you can share from browsing through or indexing the records?
I think for me, I won't know if it's, I guess it's not, a surprise, but it still is sort of a reminder. and as I said earlier, it's been 150 years since we've seen war on American soil. So we don't really understand the horrors of turmoil to that degree. And I think after I had started researching Civil War soldiers and the family, and I began to read what was happening the moment the moment they left after the Yankees came through, and the men went and joined and enlisted in the army, and the women left right afterwards. And one of my ancestors talked about how they trudged for 2 days, and two of my great-great-grandmother's daughters broke down, as she says, in the woods. And then as she talked about where they went from Ripley, Mississippi to Salisbury, Tennessee. And then I mapped it on MapQuest to see the journey. And then when she talked about breaking down in the woods, I realized that, of course, modern highways are based on old roads of the past. And one of those roads went right through Holly Springs National Forest. And of course, I had to ask myself, are these the woods where those two ladies broke down with their children? And how hard it was. And then, of course, they were taken and put on a train and sent to a contraband camp. And I think that sometimes we're excited because we see the names, and we're so happy, and we do our happy dance, but we don't realize that we're really reading words describing painful days, painful times, painful years. And so it's humbling. It's very, very humbling because the trajectory of their life had been changed. But at the same time, they could have given up so easily. We would not have, I don't think, the strength to go through what they're going through. And of course, right now, to us, a refugee is someone in a foreign country, even though right now the world is going through an incredible world refugee crisis right now.
Right.
We have no idea what it is. We're looking at records. Oh, look, there's my great-grandfather. But it's very humbling, I find, for me to be reminded of that.
And you know what else is interesting? When we're looking at this, we're looking at it with 21st century eyes.
Absolutely.
We are not looking at it at 17th, 18th, 19th century eyes. We are looking at it with 21st century.
Correct.
So, you know, you have to try to put yourself back. Doing a little quick project with some kids at an apartment community the nonprofit I work with owns. We're introducing them to the Constitution. These are 3rd and 4th graders. Because my understanding is they would never even see anything like that until high school. I don't even remember when I got it in school in the 50s or 60s. So, you know what I'm saying? But we're going to expose that. But you know what? They got to walk back in the time. They're going to play the games that the kids played in the 1780s. You know, and they're going to be outside, and it's wood. There's no plastic. You know, we're going to see what they do with that, you know, because there's no TV, there's no phone, there's no iPads, there's no nothing. You're going to play a game, and it's going to be with a stick, you know, or it's going to be the little cup into the thing, you know, going back in the time, and just see how they do to get to that, you know. So it'll be interesting. And again, 21st century eyes looking at something from the 18th century. It's a challenge.
I will add, Michael, who was on earlier, he's sending me text messages of his chiming in since he can't get back in. He said that he found his ancestors on 5 different rolls of labor contracts spanning 9 different plantations.
Oh my goodness.
And his family is based in East and West Feliciana parishes in Louisiana, which are part of the Florida parishes. Something else that he also said is that he found claims for his ancestors that they made against the person who hired them as a sharecropper for 2 years' pay.
3 years.
4 years or so.
Yeah, he reports.
That's been one of the interesting things for me is seeing the freed people bringing these claims against their either former owners or people that they were working for, and having the courage to stand up and make these claims, and often being successful in getting the pay that they deserve. That's been very impressive.
I think we have to also realize another thing. You know, yeah, the war came to an end. You know, Lee surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse. That doesn't mean that the country accepted it. You have had a free labor force your entire life, and the next day you're not going to willingly lose it. You're going to do everything you can to extend your lifestyle as you have known it. And even though we don't want to put our mind in their mind, but we almost have to. Of course, they were going to resort to any kind of method to retain what they have had, a labor force that they never had to pay. And yeah, that probably was an adjustment to make. I can imagine.
Speaking
But
of
Right, and
speaking
you
of
are so
adjustment,
right, Angela, because I've seen some of the labor contracts which stipulate basically that they have to work, of course, from sun up to sundown.
Sundown.
They can't get off. They have to do certain things. And of course, they stipulate that they will take care of the equipment, they won't break it. They will be respectful. I mean, it's amazing when you go through those labor contracts and you see how it is written. It's basically saying you're back in slavery.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely, absolutely.
exactly.
I'm going to
Yeah.
add something else that Michael just sent me. He said that he read a report from white citizens in the area that his family was enslaved in, which is in West Feliciana Parish, regarding their fear that black people were arming themselves with guns and setting up military-style training exercises, as well as establishing boundaries and borderlines that white citizens would not be able to cross without retaliation.
uh,
And this was where his ancestors were enslaved. And the plantation was Laurel Hill Plantation in West Feliciana Parish, Louisiana.
That sounds a lot like what happens in not Cane River, Red River.
Red River.
If anyone's read that, the blacks are kind of set up just like that, armed and protecting their barrier or their boundaries around them.
hmm,
Very interesting.
amazing. Amazing. No, we have to really understand what they went through. And those first years, we're thrilled to see them, but they were going through a lot of pain.
Hmm.
And I don't know if we really can understand what they went through, to be honest with you. You know, we could get somewhat of a visual, but again, you know, because I get excited for folks and then I tear up, you know, or even looking at something I find. I always think of Bernice, that one when she found someone, she was in the, I don't know, I think you were in Edgefield or somewhere and you found some records. She was so excited and then she stopped. You know, and then I teared up because she stopped. Because it hit you then. Then you're so excited that we find this, and then it's like, oh my gosh. You know, and true, just the other day
Yeah.
on that one you posted, that
Oh,
50 cents got me. It was $300.50, you guys.
$302.50.
$2.50.
Yeah,
And
it
the
hit
50
me.
cent caught both of us, you know, and we just had to hold back. You know, it's amazing to find this, but my gosh, you know,
That's
it's
right.
just,
When that reality hits you, then you have to sit back and say,
it's
"Oh,
rough.
this is real."
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's rough.
They were slaves. You know, look at this. They were a piece of property.
Yes,
And
yeah,
it's almost like it's their first piece of oral history, you know, where they can actually talk back and express without retribution those records. I see that a lot. They felt like they could easily speak on what the situation was. And, you know, so yeah, it does hit you when you go through those. Those weren't my ancestors, but it just, yeah, it hits you.
yeah, and again, even if it's not ours, you feel it, and
Mhm.
then you want to tell it, then you want to share it because you know there's generations that really don't have a solid understanding or a clue of the stuff we see, really seriously what we look at, what we see. You know, they might think a labor contract was, you know, that's getting a job. You got a job. Take it. No. You know, it could be other things attached to that. And I think, and again, we're missing a whole nother generation. My age, my children's age, they've just always heard of it because it was always around them, because the stories were always talked about. But if they have children, unless they tell them, they're not going to get it. You know, it's like that's the mission here, is to tell those stories. And the records just help to tell that story.
I have a question that I got from Vicki. Vicki Davis Mitchell is listening to us. She can't get in the room, I guess.
Cuz.
And I guess you heard that, Vicki, out there. Vicki wanted to know if anyone has gotten any school records that may be beneficial, besides maybe a pay receipt or a roster, maybe listing teachers or anything. Has anyone found ancestors on a school record? And she also wanted to know if anyone has been lucky enough to find ancestors on marriage records or marriages that were performed at the Bureau, if anyone had that experience. So school records and marriage records.
I haven't found anyone in school nor any marriage records from the Freedmen Bureau. I found marriage certificates, marriage bonds, 1871, 1874, but neither of them was through the Bureau.
Yeah, same for me. I've found school returns, like in terms of like a head count of how many students were there, but like nothing. I haven't found anything more tangible than just that, like, or what she's asking about.
Now she is, as she clarified, she wanted to know that, or she stated that some folks in charge of the Bureau may have performed a marriage for freedmen, and I can respond to that because I have posted a lot of the marriages. In fact, on one of my blog posts, I have an article that I wrote called "The First Marriages of Sebastian County, Arkansas." And it's the first marriages because they were performed by Francis Springer, who was a chaplain at the Fort Smith Freedmen's Bureau Field Office, which was also the Western District of Arkansas military encampment. And he was the chaplain there, and I have images. None of my ancestors were married there, but that's still part of my hometown local history. So because I have a blog devoted to the local history, I have posted those. And what I found on that particular one is an entire ledger filled out by the chaplain's hand of every marriage that he performed within, I guess, a 2-year period, 1865 to 67 or so. And so I'll say, yes, I have found ledgers where those marriage records were listed there. Maybe some of you have some other kinds of things like that to share.
The marriages that I found have been mostly 1870 records.
Oh, late.
Where I actually have the certificate. They have a book down in the county of Chickasaw County. So I do have those. And when I went down there last year as well as this summer, got the certificates. In fact, I ended up purchasing a book with the marriages in there. I want the whole county because I want to see who's married to who. And as far as the school is concerned, we had our own school. So one of my ancestors was the teacher of the one-room schoolhouse.
Was this right after the Civil War?
No, it was getting into the 70s.
Okay. Wow. That's still kind of neat, though.
Yeah. I have the coordinates now. I found this summer of where the school was located.
Oh, that's cool. Mm-hmm. Do you know if there's a building or anything still on the ground?
No. I just have the coordinates as to where it was, so I plan to put that in Google Maps.
Also, there should be something, an effort maybe to have a historical marker placed there, and I would probably consult people in that community to see what
librarian
would entail.
Yeah.
I do have one record. The receptionist in our office I'm tracking her family along with another couple of families in Louisa County, Virginia. And it's a Freedmen marriage record, and it lists their names. It didn't have anything else Didn't say anything about the kids, didn't say who owned them, just that they were saying that, we're husband and wife, and I have nothing else. I've got the names, last name Jackson, and nothing else on the marriage record. But that was a Freedman record that I found.
Wow.
That's probably the closest I've found on any yet. Like I said, so far I haven't found any records. And I don't know if I'm not looking in the right area or, or what. So, not even bank records.
Wow. How many of you have used, even though it's not the Bureau, it's important to point out, the bank, not the Bureau, different institutions.
Oh, yes, I've used the bank record, and thank goodness that I did, and it was in Barnwell, George, and I found my great-great-great-grandfather and great-great-great-grandfather's name on a bank record. And hey, one really great thing that happened is that I also have a DNA match that confirmed the information that I found on the bank record.
Fantastic. That's great.
I haven't found anything in the bank records.
Me either.
You know what I encourage people to do, and you may not necessarily find your ancestors, but I encourage you to go to the bank that was closest to the community where your ancestors lived and go through every depositor. You're going to be surprised. You're going to find church records. You're going to find the deacon. You're going to find the ladies' auxiliary club that had an account. You're going to learn so much about the community by just going through and reading the depositors in alpha order, and you'll be surprised. Sometimes one church had 6 different accounts, and you'll see names that you may be surprised that are familiar to you, that will appear listed on, because it's in the name of the church and not your ancestor, and your ancestor could have been an officer in that church. Read those records. They're fantastic. They're available on Family Search. They are digitized, and wonderful data. But don't confuse them with the Bureau. They are 2 different institutions.
Yeah.
Agree. Anybody have any final words as we get ready to wrap up here?
Hi, Chandler.
Dad's on the bottle right now. It's been,
You need to just have him sitting in your lap so he can just be in here.
no, it's been a long crying hour.
I know.
But we're loving every minute of it.
Well, Nika, I'll say thanks, just like Bernice said, for having the hangout tonight. I think this is good. Plus, we all can learn something. Doesn't matter how long we've been doing this. One tip from someone else might just be the thing that opens the envelope for someone else. So appreciate it, and I'm so glad we got back on track.
Absolutely, and here's my question, and this is how we'll wrap these up. What's one thing that everyone on our panel is going to take away from tonight's discussion that'll lead you in terms of your next set of research goals?
Go back and look at the records some more.
Yeah. The bank records are different from the Bureau records. That right there got me really excited.
Glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Angela.
Yeah. Gang, recognize gang. Miss Angela, I was going to say, I've done that. I've tried so many strategies trying to find a needle in a haystack with these atlases, but I believe that our family changed our last name, and that's the reason why I can't find people.
They were probably Addles at one point in time.
Yeah, like Addles, which I still believe there's some relation to Al Addles. I really honestly believe that. Haven't substantiated it yet. If anybody's related to him, feel free, get a 23andMe, Ancestry DNA, Family Tree DNA. I'm on all 3. But for me, I'm going to actually start looking through the field office records for Fort Smith to see if I can find my Indian territory family members. And that, thank you for keeping me up all night long. That's what I'll be doing tonight. George, anything you want to add in terms of your takeaways from tonight?
No, just looking at those maps, I found that just absolutely fascinating. That's something that I'm going to start once I get past some of the projects I'm doing right now. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely. So let me go over our next set of scheduled hangouts. We still have another 5 before we're done for the end of the year. Our next one is scheduled for September 22nd, and we're going to be talking about the best of BlackProGen, African American genealogists discuss issues for researchers of color. Ooh, provocative.
I'm there.
Good. On October 13th, we'll be discussing the African American Online Genealogy Toolbox. What are your go-to record sets, websites, all that kind of stuff. October 27th, we're going to discuss Tales from the Genome. Ooh, that's another controversial subject.
That's great.
Exactly. I was going to say, ask all of us. We all have a story at this point. There's something that's going on. November 10th and November 17th, we're going to do what we're going to call Brick Wall Busters. That means send us your conundrums, things that you can't figure out. You have no idea what to do, and we'll help you strategize on what your next step should be in terms of your research. All these hangouts are going to be on Tuesdays, and they start at 6 p.m. Pacific Time, 8 p.m. Central Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. I want to thank all of our panelists. Thank you so much. We've got
7 p.m. Mountain Time.
Oh, I'm sorry. I left out Mountain.
Excuse me.
I left out Mountain, which George is in New Mexico. So at this point, we've got Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, Maryland, New Mexico, and Missouri represented here on our panel. I just want to thank everyone for coming out and spending your time with us tonight. And if you have any other questions or you want to continue the dialogue, feel free to tweet all of us or message us on Facebook or comment, do whatever. I just want to say good evening, and looks like I'll be up all night long, right? He's not going to go to sleep until I go back there.
For this. Ignore me for an hour.
That's why we have Daddy. But apparently,
no, ain't the same. I don't care. Ain't the same.
Oh my goodness.
For Mama.
That's a mama's cry.
That's a mama's cry. Go handle your business with your little man, girl.
I will. You guys take care. Everybody have a good week.
Okay.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye, George.
Bye-bye. Thanks.